It's Soho Clout.
What do you want from the job centre? You want to be an air hostess? Ho, 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 no problem. Merry exams and a happy career. Ho, ho, oh, another little girl. Hello, and what do you want? You want to be a film producer? No problem again. Ho, 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 merry exams and a happy career to you from the job centre. Ho, 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 ho. Oh, I can't do this. I've got to confess to you. It's about time somebody is. I think you're old enough to know. Brace yourselves. Are you ready? There is no such thing as a job centre. It's all a con. It's all a fairy tale. They just made it up to sweeten you. If you want a job, it's not in the bag. You've got to find that job. You've got to choose the job, you've got to find the job. Apply for the job, then get the job. Is it a good job, bad job, odd job? Will it be a part-time, full-time? Oh no, smart time, dull time. Well, I go, it's the job rap. It's like a trap. I don't know if I want to be a part of it.
Nowadays, there is usually a careers teacher in school who has more than the lip service to pay in helping people get fixed up when they leave school, whether it be in academic education or further education. So certainly, a good school will have a careers teacher who's prepared to sit down on an individual basis and discuss your needs and how to go about getting them. After that, there's certainly the careers officer in town, that is at the careers service of any city, any town that young people live in. The careers officer there is a paid expert who assists the careers teacher at school. Those two people should link together very closely, and between them should provide a service for young people that will enable them not to make bad decisions.
The careers officer just asked us, what did we want to do? Usually gave us a small careers advice booklet, told us to read it and write to the addresses that were in the back, and that was it. No sort of practical help.
How many jobs did you actually apply for?
55, I think it was.
And how many interviews did you get?
About 12.
And are you working now?
Yeah.
Did you feel that you had to really do it all yourself?
Yeah. I got some help, but it's really all down to yourself, how committed you are to getting the job, really.
We do cater for young people as well. You can come in, look around, look at the cards on the board, see what type of jobs are available. Other methods that a lot of school children don't seem to realise are things like newspapers, for example. OK, you've got your jobs page on your newspaper, which is quite straightforward. You look at the adverts and reply to them. But also, there are other things like the stories in the newspaper. It may tell you that a factory is being built. Could be possible jobs there. The story may be about a firm who's got a new order, export order, whatever. Could be new jobs there. Take the name of the firm. Could be worth writing a letter to them, that sort of thing. Other things, you've got your own approach, the personal approach. We estimate that probably a third of jobs are filled by what we call the grapevine. That's somebody who works in the firm who knows that a job is coming up and gets his friends or his relatives in for the interview. That's one method. So ask your friends, your relatives, anybody you know who's in work, if they could ask around at the firm and let you know should anything come up.
Where did you go to look for jobs?
Careers office, papers, shop windows, shop window notice boards, and word of mouth from friends who had jobs, and people that I know that had jobs that sort of give me the hint that there were jobs going.
And did you manage to get a job?
Just by chance. I happened to walk past the shop and I saw a sign, and that finished. I finished that about 7 weeks ago because the shop closed.
So what's you doing now?
Still looking again.
Again, there are alternative and fringe methods of finding a job, and certainly any person watching shouldn't feel that they have to go through the traditional methods. Really, the way of judging the method of seeking a job is the end result, the job obtained. And so, anybody who has the courage and the personal initiative to go job seeking on their own shouldn't be discouraged, certainly, but that does require a lot of personal conviction and courage, which certainly might get its reward in the end.
When I first left school, I went to college for 6 months, but the course that I was on, I was there full time, but the course that I was on was only a part-time basis, and so we got a lot of time off, and I got fairly despondent with that. So I started looking for jobs just out of a matter of looking for experience in interviews and things like that. And it got to the stage where I found out from the employers that they were more interested in experience than they were in qualifications. So I decided to leave college and get a job. Then I went from my first job, which was at solicitors, to work at the council because it was more money. But I didn't like the job, so I left there. And more or less straight away I got another job at an insurance company, collecting insurance, which I stuck out for about 2 years. But after that, there again, the money problem. There wasn't enough money in that. So I left there, and after another space of time at a short job that I had, I went to work for the present job now, which is the fire service.
One of the approaches you can do is a direct approach. You can ring the firm up, speak to the personnel manager. Many a time, if you just ring up, you get through to the switchboard operator, whose attitude may be, oh no, we've no jobs. She's only the switchboard operator, she's not the personnel manager, she doesn't know what jobs are coming up. So get through to the right person, that's the first thing. Once you get through, explain who you are and what you're ringing for right at the offset. So you're going to ring up and introduce yourself, and they say, I'm interested in a vacancy that I've heard about, and tell them where you've heard it, and then take it from there.
Where else are you looking apart from the careers office?
Well, I've been going around in town, you know, asking in shops and if they wanted anything, or anything like that, you know.
Do you find that very difficult to do?
Well, no, not really, but there isn't a lot, you know. They all say, oh, we've got somebody already, but some of them do take your name and address and telephone number, you know, and ask if you can ring back if they got anything.
Do remember over the phone about your manner as well, because again, coming back to your first impression, the first impression the employer is going to get is you speaking over the telephone. So if you're in sort of a confused state, you're not very positive, you're very sort of mixed up and jumbled up, the chances are you just got to turn around and say, no, you've heard wrong, there's no job here. But if you put yourself across very well over the phone and impress him on the phone, that's your first point, the chances are you're going to get an interview, a personal interview, and you can take it from there.
I went around the job centres and signed on with a lot of the job bureaus that are around, but also I spent a lot of time looking through the paper. And also, without looking for any applications, if you just write to companies and if you make out a curriculum vitae and just send that off, sometimes you can strike lucky through doing that.
Where are you looking now for jobs?
Well, I'm the careers office basically, and then in the Yorkshire Evening Post, I'm looking there. And then sort of large companies where I think myself, you know, they might have a accountancy department where they would take on trainees, and, you know, just writing off on your own initiative, and then, you know, with the careers officer help as well.
I know this sounds ridiculous, but we do also look at the type of paper it's written on and the type of writing. You've got to do this because when you've got so many applications, you've got to pick on something. So it is important that letters are written on sort of, say, plain paper, neatly, that you read it through, that there aren't any errors. Because a lot of people, it's incredible, people don't read them through and the letters don't make sense. Or they write them on sort of shorthand notepads with all the sort of bits still hanging at the top. They don't put their addresses on or the phone numbers. These are just general things that you can actually sort of, well, it's just a case of reading them through.
Things about writing letters, you've got to imagine the employee sat there and will get quite a few letters applying for that particular job. So he doesn't want a 5-page life history of what you've done. All he needs, first of all, is just a brief outline of why you want the job. So, the letter that you should be writing should be addressed to the person who's got to be doing the interview, if you know that. If not, address it to the personnel manager or the personnel officer. Make sure it's neat and tidy. You can't stress that too much. Neat and tidy. Just give a brief outline of what you're looking for, the type of work you're looking for and why you were applying for that particular job.
Do you actually discard people at that stage?
Yes, you have to. Say we had 120 applicants in 20 places, we might initially decide to interview 40. So we've got to cut it down to that. So there's quite a lot discarded immediately.
First thing about application forms is, when you come to fill them in, don't fill them straight away, don't fill the forms in straight away. Do it on a piece of paper so you know what your answers are going to be. You'll only get one application form. So you've got to make sure that it's neat, tidy, no mistakes, no crossing out. Very basic things, write in black ink or dark blue pen. If your form's filled in red or green, things like this, it's not very good, doesn't look presentable. So get it in the right colour pen first of all. Always write in block capitals as well. Handwriting, being as it is, mine for example is not particularly good, so block capitals so that at least they can read what you're putting on there. Answer all the questions, don't leave blanks. Employers may suspect something's wrong if you're leaving out questions. For example, what qualifications have you got? You know, fill it in, or what you've taken, what results you're expecting to get. Once you've answered all the questions, check through. Just sit back, take 5 minutes, check through it, make sure that you've done it to your best ability, really. If you're having problems with that, then you can always ask your careers officer, your parents, or come down to a job centre and we'll advise on things like filling application forms in.
The other thing, of course, and the most important thing that much has been spoken about in terms of employment is the interview. And in many schools, people are almost trained to go for an interview so that they come out like automatons, but it is important. First impressions do count. Think of yourselves watching when a new teacher comes in. Automatically, you make opinions, you draw conclusions about the way the person looks, how they speak. That's what an employer does to you, and so it's very important that you prepare for an interview. You find a little about the firm, the placement. You don't ask the first question, what are the holidays? you actually look as though you're enthusiastic. Now, that is a skill that isn't learned, that you have to practice. It's difficult, but certainly that does give an edge. Employers are human. They make judgments about people when they come through the door as well.
On your bike, that's what they say, innit? If you want a job, go on your bike and look for work. Pedal yourself. But how far do you go? I've been going for ages, you know, Tour de France, bonjour. And what's all this working abroad mean? It's just like getting underpaid in a different currency. Well, it's good exercise, I suppose. And all this thing about wearing a really good suit if you go for a job to make a good impression, you know, but you look a right pikelet riding round with your best suit tucked into your socks, wouldn't you? And how can you afford a good suit if you haven't got a job? A paradox of our times. Which came first, the job or the good suit?
Appearance at interviews has got a lot to do with it. You know, usually you put your hair into a side parting and wear a sports jacket or a suit, you know, shirt and tie. I think as soon as you walk in the door, I mean, the employer who you're ending up having to work for, it takes your appearance into account quite a lot. So, you know, it's like everybody takes things on face value. So if he's not impressed with the way you look, I mean, he's not going to listen to what you've got to say in the interview.
Right. Now, what about you? Are you working?
Yes, I'm working full-time employment. I'm a bus driver. But again, I didn't go to the interview like this.
As soon as you walk through a door, in the first 5 minutes, that person sat at the desk who's doing the interview will have made a judgment on what your capabilities are, whether you're going to fit in with the firm's policy. We've done a survey over employers, and they said that their minds are 80% made up in the first 5 minutes. Now, in the first 5 minutes, all you've done is walk through the door, shook his hand, and sat down. So, your first impression, that's the main thing.
A lad who went for a college interview at Leeds, one of our best fifth-year pupils, so I thought, friendly, cooperative, very well turned out. He came back, how did the interview go? Fine. I phoned the college up and he'd been rejected. Very puzzling indeed. I saw him in the playground a few days later. He had his Sony Walkman on. He didn't seem too disrupted. So I phoned the college up to see what had happened. And they said, yes, he had rejected. We spoke to the person who interviewed him and I said, without wishing to be pushy, this particular person has been a great kid at school, very friendly. Why was he rejected? He said, well, the major reason was he never took his Sony Walkman off during the interview. So interviews aren't always smooth.
Do you think that you have to sell yourself at an interview?
Oh, yeah, you've got to go in with confidence. You know. If you don't go in with confidence, well, you can kiss the good job goodbye before you go. There's no point going to the interview.
Your 10th interview will be far better than the first interview. A little bit of the nerves will have gone. You'll have practiced what questions to ask. You know what the employer is looking for and what questions they are going to ask. So before you go to your 10th interview, for example, you should have a pretty good idea what questions you're going to ask. So therefore, you can plan your answers. You can work out what your response is going to be. But above all, no matter how many interviews you do, treat each one individually and treat each interview as your first interview.
Another classic case, of course, was sending to a young lady in the 5th year who went for an interview at a well-known hospital in the centre of town. and never arrived for the interview, and we had a rather distraught call from the person who was supposed to be interviewing saying that the young lady had never turned up. And eventually it transpired she got into the visiting queue for one of the wards instead of the visiting queue for the interviews, and was last seen of tending the sick in Ward 23.
We expect them to be nervous. Part of our job obviously is to put them at ease and to make them feel able to respond to our questioning. It's not interrogation. You know, we're there to learn a little bit about them, and from their point of view they're here to find out about the scheme. So it's a finding out exercise as well as obviously training them for interviews in general.
That's right, we're not going to ask them any questions that they don't know the answers to necessarily, or if they do, if they just say they don't know, well that's fair enough. So it's not an excuse being shy really.
The tendency is, if you're very nervous, is to give a straight yes and no answer. The problem with that is the interviewer will probably have 5 or 6 questions he wants to ask, and if you give a yes and no answer, he's got to be through the interview after about 5 minutes, and he's going to be embarrassed then about what can he ask next. As soon as the employee gets embarrassed, that's it, he cuts the interview short, says thank you very much indeed.
And we look for people that have got other things interesting to them outside work that they can contribute to what goes on here. And certainly as regards to the YTS scheme, there's a lot of activities that go on as part of the scheme, lots of projects they get involved in. It's important that they're the sort of person that can put themselves forward in that way and as I say, bring something to the
It shows some
environment.
kind of self-motivation as well. If you do activities outside school, it shows that somebody isn't always pushing you on all the time, that the teacher, you know, you're playing hockey or whatever, but that you are quite self-motivated, and you have to be at work, because in school people, you've got to get your essay in by a set date or whatever, but at work, nobody's going to chase you that way. You're just going to get told off for not doing it. So people are expected to work on their own, and I think if you have an interest, it shows that you are self-motivated.
The interview is a two-way thing. It's not just the employer asking you questions. He would expect you to ask questions of him. Things you've got to be looking at are, is the training involved? What are the promotion prospects? Is there any advancement at all? The hours, things like this. The wage, certainly ask about the wage. You've got to know about the wage to find out what pay it is. But don't sell it too much. Don't go too far. Because the thing is, there's 10 other people there and they're all after the wage. We all know that. So what we're looking for is a person who's after the job.
So what are you doing now?
Just looking for help and a job at home with a good pay.
Where do you look for jobs, and what sort of jobs are you looking for?
Just go around job centres and all that, and just call to factories. I just go out for, say, 60 quid a week at least.
Is that a reasonable amount to expect to earn?
Well, it is for me. I don't know about anybody else.
How do you feel about being on the dole?
Getting really sick now. It's getting worse.
Does it make it more difficult to go out and look for work after a while?
Yeah, as it gets worse as time gets on and that. So.
What do you see your future being?
I don't know really, not much. Not if things don't pick up.
Are you still looking for work?
Yeah, now and again.
Well, when you're at school, you never think you're going to leave. You know, you think you've got it great, just lessons every day, go on. And then the last couple of months it really gets to you, and you start panicking and finding out for jobs, and you realise you've left it too late. And that's how a lot of kids slip up, really, ending up on dole the year after.
There are jobs going about. There's not as many as there were 5 or 6 years ago, but there still are jobs. So it's important to approach and plan your job-seeking methods accordingly. So you can either take two attitudes. You either take the negative attitude of there's no hope, I'll just sign on and that'll be it. I'll be one of the 3 million unemployed. Or you can take probably the positive attitude, which is there are jobs about, it's harder to get, so I've got to make a more determined effort in order to get employment while I'm young.